This Q30 Sports presentation is brought to you by the Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden.
Hello everyone and welcome to this Q30 Sports ECAC playoff preview. I'm Connor Fortier and joining me are Rob Ciambra and Mark Spillane. Guys, how are you doing today?
It's good to be here, Connor.
Not bad, not bad. Good to be here as always.
Always, all right, good job guys. We are here to preview the matchups for this coming week in the ECAC playoffs and also look ahead to the future rounds. So guys, we got to start with this week and we'll break it down already. We have first matchup, number 12 Princeton at number 5 Clarkson. Clarkson won the regular season 2-0 in this matchup. What do you guys see in that?
You know, that's a weird one because Clarkson, a team that got off to a great start, and I think they got like 5 or 6 wins since Christmas. So they really struggled in the second half of the year. But Princeton, a squad that only has 5 wins on the year, both in and out of conference, one of course coming against Quinnipiac here in Hamden, they're not a very good team, easily the worst team throughout the year in the conference. But the way Clarkson's playing, would it really be out of the question for them to pull off that upset? I don't know. It could be an interesting series.
I understand where you're coming from with the upset, but I have confidence in Clarkson, guys, that they're going to be a new team for the playoffs because, you know, the playoff mentality comes in, obviously.
Yeah, this is true.
So I think it's going to be the Golden Knights pulling away. I think they're going to sweep them, to be honest with you.
All right, the next matchup we have is number 11 Hartford at number 6 Yale. Yale won the first matchup, and then the second matchup it tied in the regular season. The one after that, number 10 Dartmouth against number 7 Rensselaer. That RPI won 2-0 in the regular season on that one. And then the final one is we have the number 9, number 8 matchup, and Brown being the number 9 seed, and St. Lawrence being the number 8. Brown won that first game in the regular season. They won that first game, and then tied the second game. So what do you guys see in that one?
I'm really interested in that matchup, in the St. Lawrence-Brown matchup. I think that's going to be one to watch because I think either of those teams could be dangerous depending on who wins. Either of them could be. Not just Brown, not just St. Lawrence. I think both of them could be dangerous should they win. And then that Yale-Harvard one's going to be interesting because Harvard's got a lot of young talent, but Yale dominated them at Madison Square Garden a few months ago. I'm sure you guys remember that game. Yep, it was like 6-1 was the final score. And I think Yale has just a mental edge right now. They're national champions for a reason. Even though they got on a run to win that national championship and they didn't dominate throughout the year, they know we're really good. We're probably better than them, and I think that gives them an edge.
I'm excited for this Brown-St. Lawrence series, guys. I got to say Brown in 3. It's going to be a very close series, and I think that's how it's going to turn out. I hope I can get some video feed on that because that's really going to be an exciting one to watch. And then for the Yale-Harvard series, I'm looking at that too. You know, being from Connecticut, watching both these teams for a long time, I think I'm going to say Yale in 3. This is 2 teams that have been rivals for a long time, and you know, with the home ice advantage at Ingles, I think it's still going to be close between the 2 teams, but again, Yale in 3.
And we haven't really touched much yet on the RPI-Dartmouth matchup. Dartmouth, I don't see how they can win that series, and I think RPI could be a little bit scary if they get out of that round. They're a team that really got hit with some injuries hard earlier in the year when they lost Jason Kasdorf, their starting goaltender, last year's Rookie of the Year, and pretty much the goalie of the year in the conference outside of Quinnipiac's Eric Hartzell. And they've just started to get on track since losing him. And I think they could be dangerous should they advance, which I think they will. And I'm pretty much in agreement with you on all the picks, Rob.
So officially, what would you guys say would be the most intriguing matchup? We talked about a lot about the Harvard-Yale and the Brown-St. Lawrence, but what would you guys really, if you could pick any of these to watch, what would you watch?
For this round, I would have to say St. Lawrence and Brown would probably be the most fun. And then if we're looking past this weekend into seeing what could happen, I think it has to be the fact that if Yale defeats Harvard and Clarkson takes care of business, the Bulldogs come to Hamden to play the Bobcats in what would be one of the most ridiculous weekends here in Quinnipiac sports. I think that would have to be the series to watch throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, well, for this weekend, I'm going to keep my eye on Brown-St. Lawrence as well. But being from the area and not going anywhere for spring break, I'm going to try to get to get down the streets of Ingles and watch this series because this is definitely going to be exciting. And for the next round, Mark, I'm in agreement with you. Quinnipiac versus Yale would be an amazing matchup here at the High Point Solutions Arena.
And one other series to potentially watch is RPI should they advance to play Colgate. And the reason I say that is obviously Colgate has been the better team throughout the entire season. They're right there at the top of the conference for a reason, ahead of Quinnipiac, ahead of Cornell, right behind Union. And RPI has been kind of middling there in the middle of the pack. But RPI is 4-1-1 versus Colgate in the last 3 years, and they're 1-1 this year against them. They just seem to match up well against them. They have a way of being able to come out on top against the Raiders. So I think that could be interesting because you've got a top 2 team that has been really good all year but doesn't match up well against RPI. the Engineers, they could sneak in there and maybe pull off an upset.
Yeah, especially with, like you said, getting hot towards the later half of the season when it really counts. Last year, Brown was a huge surprise to make the championships in the ECAC. They beat number 2 RPI and then wanted to beat number 1 Quinnipiac in the ECACs and eventually lost to the Union Dutchmen in the championship. Who do you think could be this year's Brown and make a really surprise run in the ECACs?
I'll just say Brown again. They've been a little bit of a shocking team for me this year. You don't see a lot of dominance out of them, but they do dominate when it counts in the later periods and whatnot. They have very aggressive hitting and whatnot. I think they could be the team again this year. If not, my second choice is probably Yale.
I would agree with Brown again. They're a physical team. They play a very physical game. And Marco DiFilippo hasn't played a whole lot lately. It's mostly been Tyler Steele, one of the freshman goaltenders on the squad. But if DiFilippo does get into the net throughout the playoffs, we've seen him steal games before. We've seen him steal games against Quinnipiac where the Bobcats dominate a game and only tie 2-2 because of the way he plays. That could be scary. And you mentioned Yale. Obviously, they could get on a run. I don't know if they'll be able to get past Quinnipiac if they do win their first-round series and Clarkson takes care of Princeton. But outside of those two teams, like I said, I've been touching on RPI a lot. If they get through that first-round series, they just seem like they've got things set up for them. If they play Colgate, before you know it, they could wind up as in the top 4 going to Lake Placid.
Yeah, true. And Colgate was definitely a surprise this season, especially grabbing the number 2 seed coming out of the regular season. And that all starts from their freshman goaltender, Charlie Finn, 2.42 goals against average and 13-6-4, overall through the year. So even though they are the second-ranked team coming into this, they're actually kind of a surprise team. People don't really think they can make it all the way to Lake Placid, but if they do and make it to the championships, to me it would be a surprise. And I think for you guys, too, that would also be a surprise as well.
Yeah, early in the year, we sat down and Marty Joseph was on with us and we talked about this kind of stuff and we said, here's the teams that are going to be good this year. Quinnipiac, Union, Cornell, RPI. RPI got hit by those injuries. They kind of slid down the board. Well, the other 3 are still there and RPI has been replaced by Colgate. So they definitely are the surprise team throughout the year. You're absolutely right about that, Connor.
Yeah,
Rob?
Yeah, I have to agree. Colgate, especially last weekend at Quinnipiac, that was a huge win for them, coming into Hamden on Quinnipiac's senior day, taking advantage of the fact that Jordan Samuels-Thomas was out, and then also Dan Federico going down early in the game as well. They just took advantage of the Bobcats for the rest of the game.
So now that we're talking about top 4 teams, what do you think could be the top 4 team that doesn't actually make it to Lake Placid? Mark, we'll start with you.
It's so funny. We've been talking about Colgate, and I'm going to stick with them. And the reason is I'm not sold on them. They've shown flashes of brilliance, and you just mentioned it when they came to Quinnipiac and defeated them on senior day. You would think the Bobcats would be all sorts of jacked up for that game. Connor Jones, Kellen Jones, Jordan Samuels-Thomas, these guys playing their last game. Corey Hibbler, the captain, playing their last game for the Bobcats. And they came in here and they got a win. And then we've also seen flashes of ineptitude, where they get out there and they play a team like Dartmouth and they lose. And you're like, okay, well, what was that about? We've seen them beat the best. We've seen them lose to some of the worst teams in the conference, which is kind of similar to the way the Bobcats have been this year. But I would say if there's anybody in the top 4 that I'm not totally sold on, that I don't think will make it to Lake Placid, it's probably the Raiders.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Mark. The Raiders are definitely a team that have been iffy for me this year. It's all going to depend on their playoff mentality, how they play that first round. I think it depends on I don't think no matter who they play, they still go to 3 games, whoever they play in the first round, and it's up to them, stay confident throughout the whole way.
So now that both of you don't have Colgate in the top 4, what 4 teams do make it up to Lake Placid?
Well, I think the top 3 that we talked about, that we've been talking about all year, I think they still make it. I think the Bobcats make it. I think they defeat Yale next week, and I do anticipate Yale coming into Hamden for that matchup. I think Union pretty much rolls over whoever they wind up playing in the second round in the quarterfinals. They are a fantastic team, and they've shown that throughout the year. Easily the best team in the conference. Obviously, we've seen the Bobcats defeat them, but we've also seen the Bobcats lose to them. So I think those are the top 2 teams. Cornell with Andy Isles, their physical game, I think they make it. And I think RPI is going to be that 4th team that gets in there because I think they might just be able to pull that upset against Colgate. I would say it would be Yale, but I don't think they can get past the Bobcats.
I have to agree with you, though. Yale's not going to get past the Bobcats if they play them. I'm almost confident. I'm really confident about that one. So I was going to say Quinnipiac. Cornell, Andy Isles has been playing very well for them lately, so I see them going. I have to say Union as well. I mean, Union, they're just a powerhouse this year. I mean, Shane Gostisbehere has been a little bit, I don't want to say gone missing, but sort of like that, but they still have been able to sort of survive without them, and then RPI as well. I think they have this defenseman, Luke Karates from Connecticut. He's a big kid, heavy hitter. He really has a huge impact in the defensive zone play and then clearing the puck out for them to start an offensive zone break.
So no argument for Clarkson possibly coming in there as the number 5 seed. We saw this team was picked basically to finish last in the ECAC preseason poll, and they surprised everyone, even getting up to the number 14 ranking in the USCHO.com poll. I mean, certainly they're a surprise number five seed, and they could have somewhat of an easy way, especially starting off with Princeton. Now, depending on the semi matchups, we'll see how it is. But any argument there for Clarkson at all?
Not totally sold on Clarkson still, and that's really just because of how they've struggled throughout the year since the turn of the year. You know, since we got into 2014, they've really struggled. But when you got a team that's pretty good and everybody says, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, lights a fire under them sometimes. So I wouldn't be totally surprised. I'm just not sold on the Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them sweeping the Tigers this weekend at Princeton, but that's as far as I could see them getting. I don't see them making it to Lake Placid at all.
All right, so both of you guys are consensus with your top 4 of Union, Cornell, Quinnipiac. Rob, you had RPI, same with Mark. So who do you guys think wins it?
I'm going to go with the Bobcats. I think it's going to be a Union-Quinnipiac final. I could see the Bobcats winning just based on, you know, they've had an up and down year, but this year it's different. They know last year in the ECAC playoffs, there was sort of an upset that Brown pulled on them, and I'm sure they're looking for a little bit of revenge, whether it's Brown or not, in the semifinals. And I think the Bobcats can do it this year.
Mark, you?
I think Quinnipiac can do it, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I'm going to go with the Dutchmen up there in Schenectady. I think the Union Dutchmen are going to take the ECAC, and it's not just because of what they've done this year, but they know how to win these tournaments. They've done it twice in recent years, and they've won regular season titles in recent years, not just this year. They're a team that knows how to win. They've done it under different coaching staffs, which tells me that the players on the rosters, or the players on the roster, are the ones who know how to win these games. And I think that's what's going to be the case again this year. The Bobcats, I think, are close. If Federico, who's been missing some time, continues to miss time in the defensive core, I think that puts a lot of pressure on them. Union has a lot of speed up front. Every time you watch a Union game, you're going to notice a breakaway and potentially a breakaway goal, and I think that could cause issues for the Bobcats. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Quinnipiac Union title game for the ECAC, because it's tough to vote against the Bobcats with the way they play against top-tier teams, but then there's always that Cornell lurking there, and if RPI does get hot, or even if Clarkson makes it and they get hot, but you know, with Andy Isles in net for Cornell, we just saw it 2 weeks ago. You know, he was lights out against the Bobcats. And
Mark, I want to interject for a second. You talked about you know, Federico being out. Jordan Samuels-Thomas just returned this past weekend for the Bobcats. He played Friday, and they won, I think it was St. Lawrence. They beat 8-0. And that was a game I went on Bobcat Breakdown, and I thought they were going to lose that game just because they were missing Federico. Samuels-Thomas came back, but he did not play Saturday, and that ended up being a 1-1 tie. So you could tell the effect that Samuels-Thomas has on this lineup as well.
He really does make a big difference. And you look at the line chart, and you maybe pull out one of the Jones twins. You pull out Matt Pekka. You pull out Bryce Van Brabant, and you still look at the team and you say, it's still a pretty good team. There's a lot of depth here. You take Jordan Samuels-Thomas out of that lineup, and all of a sudden the team looks completely different. The depth of scoring is gone. And even though he didn't have much of an impact on that game, it can't be a coincidence that the second he comes back, they score 8, and then he sits out the next night and they score 1. So I think Rob's got a point.
Yeah, definitely. If they get him back, you could put him on a line with Hibbler and Bryce Van Brabant. A very big line for college hockey, and that would be a very a huge thing to have against a Cornell or a Union. And I agree with you, Mark. If it's Union Quinnipiac in the championship, Union does kind of have a mental edge over Quinnipiac for the fact that what happened last spring we were talking about the other day during the NCAA run, and how Quinnipiac ended it for Union. Union has a different mindset against the Bobcats, and I think that could be enough to completely propel them past the Bobcats.
The Dutchmen are not happy about that embarrassing loss to the Bobcats last year in the tournament, and you can see it with the way they play. Every single hit is aggressive. Everything they do at 100%. You can see it even when they lost to the Bobcats here at home. I think you're right. I think there's a little something extra.
There's a little bit of an edge there.
It's kind of like when Quinnipiac plays Yale. There's just a little something extra, a little bit of an edge. I think Union has that against the Bobcats.
Yeah, certainly. All right, well, that will do it here for this Q30 Sports ECAC playoff preview. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Q30 Sports, and like us on Facebook as well. For Rob Ciambra, Mark Spillane, I'm Connor Fortier. Take care, everyone.